Yeah, it'll be. The meeting today was basically to get any data that you guys, have to share, and then I wanted to hear about your test scores. I didn't get any information back. Miss Allen thought that was weird, I did too. But I don't know how you guys did, and I just want you to share a little bit, with how it went, what happened, what you feel, was good about it, strengths or some things that maybe could have been done differently. 'Cause-
Well, I'll go first.
Okay.
I have a reading two class. My reading two class is mainly juniors.
Mhm.
For their test scores, actually only out of 10 students, one passed, and he was actually receiving private tutoring from Miss Mayfield.
So yeah, those were retesters.
They were
For English
retesters.
too?
English two.
Okay.
Now, one of the things, true, I've only had them for 6 weeks, but I feel that if I had been more informed about what their weaknesses were, then I would have been able to assist them more. But I didn't have the necessary information to sit down and say, okay, we need to work on grammar, we need to work on vocabulary, we need to work on how to essentially annotate stories. I didn't have any of that information. I was only given the English 2 in the course book and say, let's go through it. But for some students, I found for my students, that was very boring for them. We started reading to help increase just their reading skills. But I just feel if I had been a little bit more informed, then I would have been able to help them a little bit more. Now, I have no idea where they came in at because I just got a yes or a no for my students.
So you don't know how close
You don't know
their
their actual
past
scores.
Yeah.
I actually do not know their actual
I
scores,
try to get the scores from him, I don't know.
which they all, are wanting to.
And I've noticed that grammar is a very, very weak area. But I made an attempt to spend a couple days doing just grammar, the whole structure of it, and I was told not to do that. And I'm like, well, how do we squeeze that in? Do we do it on bell ringers? How do you squeeze in a relevant understanding for them? Because that is a weakness, and that's a big part of what they have to do to perform at that English 1 and 2. Is short answer and revise and grammar.
See, that's something that we work on English 3. The only difference is for my students, I've just bumped them up. We do SAT prep, English completion, and sentence structure. And I did it that way because I know next year they have an SAT to take.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just trying to give them even more exposure for English 3. But and a lot of vocabulary. And honestly, with vocabulary, we have to go over vocabulary, just the pronunciation, how to pronounce the words. I break it out phonetically for them and write it on the board because they're lost. Once we did group 1 on the SAT prep, we finished that group 1 section. When we hit group 2, they just turned and said, so they're not ready. They're just not ready. And honestly, I don't know, I know Ms. Trice does a really good job at her class for the 9th graders, and I'm finding now like the 11th graders, they're just missing that element. It's like they didn't get it in 9th grade, they didn't get it in 8th and 9th grade, so they're lost.
10th graders are lost. My 10th grade reading class, they're lost. And so I don't know if it's because there's been so much transition from what I'm hearing. They haven't had consistent teachers, and I think they're missing a lot of the curriculum and the things that they're supposed to have because they've had those transitions. They've gone long periods without teachers. So I think that's just where the breakdown is.
How did they do?
For English 1, it's kind of like we had positive and then negatives. So, like Miss Oliver, I only had 6 weeks with my kids. For my reading students, I really only had like 4 weeks with them. Because during the STAR boot camp, they took them away from me. So I didn't see them. They were supposed to have intervention, but I don't know if they really had like a full.
They didn't schedule you to have yours like they did everyone else.
So I didn't have my 10th graders at all.
I
during
didn't know
STAR.
that.
I don't know. So, because of that, 3 of my reading students passed, but also what I'm noticing is their passing reflects their effort in class. So my reading students, that's the class that have been struggling, like they're okay with failure, and that's what we were trying to kind of get over with. Like they'll accept just not turning anything in and knowing they'll get a 0. It's like they don't have the desire to succeed sometimes, or maybe they're just tired, or they've been used to just getting by with things. So 3 of them did pass, but out of, there were 14 retesters. So 14 retesters, 3 passed, but 57% showed improvement. So they had a higher score than before. With my 9th graders, they said the last year's passing rate for 9th grade was 37%. This year we were at 49. So we showed improvement there. And again, like looking back over, like I made a spreadsheet of who passed. I went through and did like their differences, so they were off like 150 points or 600 points. So I saw how far they were off. So I had 52 students not pass for English, for the English one, out of 116.
You got 116 retesters?
No, this is the 9th
Oh,
grade.
this is their first time?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the first
So,
time.
oh,
No, I think there's only 14 retesters.
Only 14. Well, there were more, but they weren't mine. I don't know who they are. I think it was 16 more retesters, but I've never seen
For 9th grade.
For 10th. They were
Oh,
like
well,
10th or 11th.
English more. English more.
So they were different grades, but some of them weren't in my reading class. So I think it was 16 of them. And then had 2 students who didn't test, so they just weren't here. But again, it's like the effort that you give in class, I can tell whether or not you passed. And some of them I got upset because they had amazing scores, but they don't give me any effort in class. So
I mean, the 8th graders did well. I don't know what attributed to that though. I'm still kind of on the fence about what made that work for them.
I can tell you the 8th graders were my 7th graders last year, and they were a lot like these kids. They'll work really, really hard on the start, but they won't work hard in class. So that may have been why your scores were so good.
And I think it's also foundation, because I know when I first came here, like your 7th graders had a good foundation. They came for 8th grade.
8th graders had big gaps.
You know,
Your 8th graders had big gaps in their education.
but they had people who were working with them in the first part of the year, because Miss Northern, she was here, and she really worked with those kids and got them together. So between her and Miss Mayfield in the beginning of the year, I think that really made the difference, because they came from 7th grade, they had knowledge, and then that knowledge was just added to when it came to 8th grade, that the light bulb hit for a lot of them, and they were like, oh, okay.
But even in
We have
7th grade, a
this.
lot of them were borderline.
And then, but I had every last one of them for those couple of boot camps. And so I felt like whatever they had, that maybe I was able to reiterate some things.
And I think that's it. I mean, it's the stability.
But I broke that test down.
And I think that, but they need that.
I broke it down. I explained the categories. I explained to them what they were looking for and what exact skill they needed to tack each question one by one. We did that the whole last 2 weeks. And so if it needed to have textual evidence, I showed them how and what that looked like and what they needed to do in the skill of that. Or if it was the author's point of view or inferencing, I broke that down in the reading and how when they say cross genres, what that meant. And I explained to them that the nonfiction and the poetry, but still they were synonymous in the same subject. but you had to be able to relate to different things with it and to know that those were two different genres, but they were crossing them, for you to analyze it.
I think what helped my kids with those genre connections is I introduced like different pieces. So like every day for like 2 weeks or every other day, we introduced a new piece. It was a different genre. And then at the end of that, like those 2 weeks, we made a foldable, and they had to tell me like what was the mood for this, or what was the theme for this, and what's the connection between these two pieces. So they had to actually go through and identify, and we pulled it. So I didn't just give them poetry, like I mixed it up. So they're like, oh, but in this poem they talked about this, and in this short story they talked about this. I'm like, yeah. So I tried to give them pieces that were related in some sense, so they could kind of practice.
Yeah, I did 9th grade EOC and the boot camp thing. That's the summer for the retakes, and every last one of them passed.
I'm hoping, because I had some students who were so close. Like I had students that if they would have taken it last year, they would have passed because the score went up. Last year you would have had to have a 3750. I had kids hit 3750, but now you have to have a 3775. So that kind of.
So you're talking 1 or 2 questions.
Literally, I had students not pass for like 3 questions. And so that's why I went through and did the differences, because I really want to target those students who were like 200 or less, because that's simple. I can get you through. I think it was like 27 of them out of the 52.
Wow. So your 7th grader, you hadn't got anything back for them yet, and so we really don't know.
They said we probably won't get ours till July.
I know
ETS has been hiring a lot more.
I know they switched companies too. That didn't help.
We took it earlier last year. We took it in April.
So you got it back sooner.
Yeah, we got them back like a week and a half, 2 weeks later. It was really quick. But by taking it so late, because I thought we would have had our writing scores back since we took that in February?
You all took it. Oh no, we took it March.
We don't have the writing scores back either.
They've been hiring. The company's been hiring more people to go over the writing process. I know they sent me the other day to apply.
Oh, I guess I didn't like it was well, I mean, in regards to moving forward next year, the STAR, I mean, for all of us, we're kind of new, coming here with the kids, for most of us. And really just, to me, it was a learning process, to see what the kids really need, because I guess in the end, they do have some language barriers with interacting too with the material. But I'm thinking when we get to the STAR piece, I don't know. I just feel like it's something that we can brainstorm, that, what I'm saying, to make everybody successful at any level. And I know that's the difficult part about it, because we all had something different.
I think what will help, like, make a big difference is as long as they have a consistent teacher throughout the year. Like, I think that was the main thing with the entire English department. None of the students had a consistent teacher.
And that's probably what contributed to the 8th graders, because they did have Miss Mayfield, because Miss Northam and Miss Mayfield was working with the 8th graders. But what else? 9th? They had multiple teachers.
10th grade, 11th,
And to be fair, even in the beginning of the year, prior to you guys getting here, the teachers that was here
were in and out.
Yeah.
So these
one teacher didn't even
had,
start for like 3 weeks.
I think that was 9th grade.
No, 9th grade. And the other one was here, but was in and out, and she was a new teacher at that. So and then last year there were challenges on the high school side
for English.
So I think that's what's really affecting the kids. Is not. I think they get lazy because they're not really having to work because their teachers aren't here. And then when somebody gets here that's making them work, they're confused. Like, what? I haven't had to do this, or I got a 90 last semester, and they didn't have to turn in any real work.
Not a true reflection of their learning. It was just paper pushing.
And I can say for my class, they didn't like the zeros I put in the book.
But it makes a difference.
A couple of them who failed the first 6 weeks I was with them, they came back this time and they're working
A different mindset.
with a different
Because you're
mindset,
not
because they
doing
said,
I
You
don't
mean-
give 50s for
they're
things
like,
that aren't submitted. If you don't
oh,
turn in work, I'm not giving you
right.
free grades.
And I put that 0 on the book, and I said, you're not giving me any work, and I put that 0 on the book, and I'll tell you, every last